Filming weddings. That's what this episode is going to be all about. So I'm going to talk about how I got into filming weddings and how you can get into them, or maybe you know someone's trying to get into filming weddings. I'm also going to talk about some of my experiences with filming weddings throughout the course of my time doing them. And another thing I'll talk about is like the editing side of stuff. And then maybe some other little small details between that all. So yeah, hopefully this is an interesting episode for you. And if that sounds like an interesting topic to you and you like talking about stuff like this, then maybe this is the podcast for you. And you can hit that little subscribe button while you're here. But anyway, now that we got that out of the way, this is the Can't Stop Creating podcast. And my name is Max. I have creatives that come on here and talk about how they got to where they are in their creative field, or sometimes there's episodes with just me where I talk about what I do. So that's what this episode is. So anyway, you're probably wondering, hey, shut up and talk about how you got into filming weddings. Quit wasting my time. I got stuff to do today. And I get that and respect that. So, I got into filming weddings a very different way than most people did. If we take it back to like the very start, maybe like 10 years ago, I think a friend of mine was like, hey, my dad knows someone that like needs some wedding stuff filmed. And at the time, that was like, I hadn't even touched wedding video business. I knew nothing. And I was like, sure, I'll just like come through, like if he just needs clips or whatever. And I got to like, and this is going to sound kind of ignorant, but I haven't been to too many weddings throughout my life. Like, I think I've only been to like, outside of filming weddings, I'm talking about being a person attending weddings. I think I had only been to like 2 or 3 or something, not many, and I was too little to understand how they go. So when I went to do that one for my friend's dad, I didn't really know what to do other than like record like little clips of the ceremony or record like clips of like little details and stuff like that. Like I didn't understand how the day went. And after that, that was like, obviously I did that for like very cheap, if not free. And after that, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know if this is the thing for me. And it kind of scared me a little bit, I'll be honest. And then if we skip ahead like 3 or 4 years, I was working at a golf course. And one day while I was a golf cart attendant guy. So while I was giving someone's like golf bag to them, I saw one of my friends at the top of the staircase, and he like had a camera pointing at the golf course. And I was like, what are you doing here? I'm like, what are you doing here, bud? And he's like, oh, I'm just here filming a wedding. And I thought, you know what? I feel like this is the right time to give this a try again. I'm a little bit older now. I'm like more mature. I understand how this stuff kind of works. And so, yeah, I like kind of picked his brain a little bit. Anytime I see someone doing something that I'm interested in, I pick their brain. Like, how'd you do this? What'd you do? And like, I just ask questions, right? Like, that's how I get into stuff. And he was like, yeah, I know someone that is like works for this X company that needs other videographers. So I was like, cool, let me know. And I think the dude actually contacted me like 7 or 8 months later. So I kind of played the waiting game for a long time. And that's, that's not for me to say if that's normal or not. Different people hit you up at different rates depending on when they need you, etc. It could be like the timing of the year sort of thing. But anyway, with that said, I started working with this company, and that was a huge help. Like, I don't know where I'd be right now without them, because that was what kind of gave me like the foundation for what I do. I think the first wedding I did with them, I did with that guy that got me the gig with them. And he was like, hey, here's like, it was my friend. And I think you might listen to this. So shout out to Anthony if he does listen to this. But I filmed a wedding with him like partially because he was like, oh, here's what happens throughout the day. Like, he literally had to be like, hey, you go there and this is what happens at a wedding, because, oh my God, I had no idea. I thought that people hung out and there was a ceremony and then they left. I didn't know what happened at a wedding. Yeah, it sounds ignorant. Okay. You can boo me. But anyway, he brought me through the day. I like shot clips of what he told me to do. And he was like, hey, at this time, this is going to happen. Like, hey man, like you can't miss this. And like, hey man, this is what's going to happen at this time. And this is who like tells you about this stuff going on. And, nice enough there with the people I worked with, they gave you like a little thing in your phone that had like a checklist of things to go through. And that checklist to this day has been like the best thing in the world. Like every now and then, if I'm having a really stressful time, I'll just go and look at that checklist to like make sure, dummy check myself, make sure I got everything. Because that checklist has been like the best thing in the world. So I highly recommend that. If like this is new to you, like write a checklist of the day to make sure that you're like getting what you need. But I want to get into like talking about stuff with the client later on in this episode. But anyway, yeah, so I did that for up until like very recently. I haven't shot anything with them. Just because like the way that like I've been offered higher rates for different things, etc. I mean, that's just like how it works, right? You like move on and you go do different things. But it's one of those things where it's like if I ever, if they ever like desperately need me in a pinch, I'm like, all right, cool, I'll be glad to help you out, sort of thing. So I'm not like totally like kicking that out of the way. But anyway, I think that if you're someone who's like getting into it, you need a good foundation like that to get you started, and like someone to give you direction, then go do some on your own. And I've done like, I don't know, I probably did like close to like 75 or so with them, maybe a little bit less, I don't know. And it gives you a good idea of like how the day goes, and it really puts things in perspective of how quickly things move, and like who's where and what's happening here, and how you travel from one spot to another. And you need that foundation before you can't just like jump into it and get like this amazing paycheck and not know what you're doing. You have to know like what's going on, and like that's how you get like a trust with like a client that you're going to work with, right? And you need to build that trust, and so you have little ways to do that. So this is one way that I'm going to talk about. So there is now more than ever before, there are so many wedding video companies out there that need videographers. And I cannot stress that enough. Like someone said that to me a long time ago, and I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I probably shouldn't have said that, because now more than ever, it's so true. If you literally just search like wedding videography, like anywhere in like the suburbs, or like wedding videography companies, like you'll find them. Like they're even on Instagram. Like if you even search like wedding video and like search your town or something, like they're on Instagram. Or like wedding videographers. Sometimes like other videographers are like willing to like help you out. They'll bring you on to the wedding to be like, hey, here's how it goes. So you might not even need a company sometimes. You can just find a friend that does it, and they'll give you kind of like the route throughout the day if they have like a nice like easygoing wedding to do, right? Like if they have a stressful one, they're probably not going to bring you on. But that's like always a good way to like get your feet wet, to understand like how the day goes, and maybe like mock what they're doing. Bring your camera, get a couple of the same shots they're getting, just so you like, again, have a feel. I will say this 100 times throughout the episode because it's so important. You're probably like, Max, stop saying that, but it's quite literally the most important thing. So that's one way. Another way is to like, and I've time and time again I've talked about this, but is to like know people and build like genuine connections with people, right? So like, I don't want someone that doesn't know me to just immediately hit me up because they watch this, right? Like, if you know me and like, we've had some sort of friendship and, it's that sort of level of things, and it's like, all right, cool, maybe hit me up. But like, if you are a random person, yeah, hit me up, maybe like talk to me about this a little bit, like pick my brain, stuff like that. And then, we can talk about bringing you on. But like, I'm very hesitant oftentimes if like someone's just like, hey, bring me to a wedding. I'm like, whoa, pump the brakes. I don't know if that's a personality thing, but it feels very like aggressive to me. So I tend to not do that, which I think that applies to a lot of other people. So like build like connections with people, and then they're like willing to help you out. You know what I mean? And so when I say people, I'm talking about photographers. I'm talking about like other videographers. Maybe find someone on Instagram, like wedding videographer, ask them if they're down to meet up at a coffee place, grab coffee with them, ask them what they do a little bit, like build like some sort of connection with this person, right? Just sending like one DM won't do it. I mean, maybe someone that's like really extra helpful will do that, but there's not many out there. I will say that. I tend to be a helpful person, but you gotta build that connection first. And that connection goes a long way, like way down the road, like years from now. just because you like built that just to do that doesn't mean like that's all that person's useful for, right? Like I'm not saying like you use someone, but I'm saying like once you build that connection, then they're gonna be like, oh shoot, da 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 was a genuine person. So then when they're doing a wedding, like 2 years from now, they're like, oh, I remember when I met this person. They're gonna bring you on, right? Like that's usually how I bring people on to stuff through that way as well. And now another way, talk to like photographers. Photographers always working weddings, and some couples doing weddings will tell their photographer like, hey, can you grab a couple of video shots? But they like, because the couple doesn't realize that like, you need like a videographer to do like a video, right? They just think that like someone has a camera, so it's just gonna happen. So like talk to photographer, like wedding photographers too, and be like, hey, I'm a videographer. If you need someone in a wedding, like photographers oftentimes will like know couples, or like maybe even sometimes photographers know like other people that are like looking to do like a wedding like super cheap, or like there's always that. Another way to do it is talk to like other people in your family. So like maybe like someone that you're close to that has a relative that needs a wedding filmed, or maybe it's like one of your relatives, or like someone in the, like that would be the best case scenario, someone in like your immediate family. That way, like if you do mess something up when it's like your first one or one of your first ones, it's like not the end of the world, you know what I mean? Because it's like they get you, they know you, you're not going to get in trouble or like risk losing footage or anything like that. That's the best possible way. I've heard people that have got into it that way, and then sometimes when you're at a wedding filming, there will be someone there and be like, oh my God, I remember that guy there. And then like, they know who like the main person was at the wedding, which is like your relative. And then they'll be like, hey, I saw your son or your daughter filming the wedding, da da. And then it goes from there. Right. That's one way I've heard quite often from people. I think I've exercised like a lot of the ways you can get into it. So yeah, hopefully that is useful. Now I want to move on to talking about, how kind of starting on your own goes once you do get your feet wet. And this is really interesting. This is at least kind of my experience with it, at least. Once I did like start shooting with that company I was talking about, they had me shooting all these weddings, blah, blah. I felt pretty comfortable. And then while I was doing that, like I didn't really, like when you work for someone else, oftentimes you can't just like put your work up, because like there's a contract you sign that says like, hey, you can't release it's like their footage, right? So you can't just release it. But there were people that I knew that I told like, and you have to always like tell people, like remind people too that you film weddings, because like I feel like even me talking about this now will remind somebody to be like, oh yeah, Max films weddings too. Do you know what I mean? But it's not like my main brand. It's like something I do and something I think I'm talented at, but it's not like my thing, quote unquote. And so like the reminder of telling people also helps. But anyway, so while I was like shooting weddings for them, when I told people, I would often get like second shooter calls. And those were nice because it was outside of working for them. It was like a second shooter rate, which you kind of get like half of, or like sometimes like between like a quarter to a half of what the main videographer is getting. And you just follow along lead videographer throughout the day, but the lead videographer gives you assignments like, hey, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. And second shooting is another good way to like kind of get your feet wet with all this, because you kind of have someone telling you what to do throughout the day. And I don't know if like some people are the kind of people that don't like being told what to do, and I don't quite like being told what to do. But it is nice an event of filming weddings because they're like, hey, do this. And it makes your day nice and easy. You don't have to think. You just do. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, you have to think about your shot and do, like, creative stuff on your own. But I'm saying, like, you don't have to think about, like, where do I have to be? What am I going to do? Like, they'll literally tell you what to do. If they're a good person, that is. So there's that. And also the glorious part about second shooting is sometimes you don't need to, like, be there the whole time that the lead shooter is. But it is fun because you get to see how other people, like outside of like, you get to see how to work with another videographer is what I'm trying to say, and like how that all goes. Because a lot of weddings are with two videographers. Like that is very typical for weddings. And again, teaches you how to work with like another videographer plus a photographer. So you kind of have like 3 media people around all day. So that kind of like trains your brain in a different way, whether you think it is or not. It just kind of gets you warmed up to like more people interacting while you're trying to like think about your process. And by that, I mean like, you know, you're kind of like getting shots, but you're trying to make sure you're not getting like the same shots as someone else, or you're not stepping in the photographer's way, you're like blocking another camera, little things like that. So second shooting is like a good way when you're first getting into it, like on your own outside of working for someone else. Outside of like, I should phrase that with saying like outside of working for another company, right? Like you're working for someone else, but like you're like on your own. You're not like, you're on your own in the sense of what the other person's telling you is what I'm trying to say. So like that's kind of been my experience where I was like, I work for someone else, then I did some second shooting, and then I was like, all right, let me take the leap and do this thing on my own. So that's what we'll dive into then. So one of the first weddings I took on my own was probably, I want to say like 5 years ago, something like that. I remember someone emailed me, and this was before I like mentioned anything about weddings on my website. So the first one I did was when a friend of mine from high school wanted his wedding filmed. He emailed me and was like, hey man, we want this, this, and that, like very concise. I was like, cool. And I was able to use like what I learned from shooting with that other company to film his wedding. And so I just followed the same steps. And then he was like, hey, like I need this done, like gave me a couple other specific things. And I was able to learn. And the glorious part about doing it on your own outside of being with someone else is like you start to realize like the things that you need to have on your own that like someone else doesn't require. So like you might start thinking of like extra things, like different audio things, like, oh shoot, I need to get like this cable to plug into like this board, or like, oh shoot, I need to get this like lavalier mic so I can record this person's audio too. Or like, oh, I need to get this lens so that I can get this shot that's like different from this, you know, company's requirements. Or there's different like ways to shoot weddings, right? Just because like someone has a way of shooting doesn't mean you need to keep doing it that way. Like there's different ways you can capture a wedding. And so, yeah, that was a really nice like stepping stone for me, I should say. Because I was like, I realized some stuff that I needed after doing that one. And that was the first time I like edited a whole wedding on my own. And that was crazy. The first one obviously took like way longer than any other wedding I've ever done. But I'll towards the end of this, I'll get into the editing part of things. But then I did that, and then I was able to post that wedding on my site. And then another friend saw that I posted that and was like, hey, can you film my wedding? Like, I know you do like video, blah, blah, blah. So then I did that. That one turned into like someone seeing that and me doing it. So like the idea is that you shoot a wedding, you edit it, post it, you share it, and then people realize you do it, and then more people hit you up if they like what they see, right? So and then, you know, as it goes on, like I feel like to this, I can't say I'm like a quote unquote like expert, but I can say that like I know what I'm doing, right? Like there's always I don't think like you can say that like anyone's quote unquote like an expert, you know what I mean? Like there's people that like can say that, but like everyone's still learning, right? Like no one's perfect. You're still learning something new each day. Like whether it's you watch a video, you talk to a friend, like whatever it is, there's always something you're learning. It's a never-ending learning process, just as anything else is. Once I started getting more weddings on my own, I figured, well, I can probably get more weddings if I'm able to like share my work a little bit more, right? So I thought, how can I do that? Well, what I didn't realize that I realize now is there's like a whole community of like wedding videographers on Facebook, and there's different like Chicago wedding videographer groups. There's different like little networks online, whether it's like maybe like a different Facebook group or like an Instagram group, etc. There's communities, and if you put your word out there that you do it, or even if you're just like commenting or you interact in the group, other people know that you do it, and other people are willing to hit you up. And that's how people have like found me through different Facebook groups. But I also on my website do like a thing called SEO, search engine optimization. I put in like wedding videographer for my area, and like every now and then I'll run an ad for that. But people find me through my website through searching that on Google. So that was where I was kind of like, okay, now I can take this to the next level and like have more people hit me up. And as time goes on, I got more and more weddings, and now it's just like I like blink the eye and I'm able to do what I do and I know what I'm doing. But as time goes on and you buy more equipment, you gain more experience, right? Instead of shooting like that first wedding for $75 like I did, you then crank up your price, and you go up on your price depending on like where you think you are as a creative and like what you deserve, right? And sometimes you got to pay attention to the market, and depending on like where the market's at right now with like costs for weddings, you maybe up your price a little bit, or maybe it's like, it's too high for the moment. You need to bring it down a little bit just so you can get some more. But whatever you do, you don't want people to take advantage of you. You always want to charge what you have to charge in order for you to, get your best workout, in order for the client to be happy as well. And that is a really important thing. And you need to realize like what you're able to offer and what that's worth. And that's something I can't tell you. It's a learning process for myself too. I'm always like, okay, this and that. And then you'll hear people that like don't need to do this and that from weddings, and you're like, okay, well, it'd be this much now that you don't need that, etc. It always changes depending on where you think you're at. So, I don't really feel comfortable like sharing my prices on here just because like I said, it changes depending on where you're at. So with that said, hopefully this is all. If you're still listening right now, hopefully this all makes sense. Now, I guess I could quickly talk about equipment, right? Because I briefly scratched on it. Equipment is a very interesting end of this because you have to learn a lot about cameras. And with weddings, especially with ceremonies that last like an hour and a half, like long ceremonies, one thing that's been so nice for me is to have cameras that continuously roll past 30 minutes. The camera I'm filming this podcast on now ends at 30 minutes, and then I have to go reset it. Now, can you imagine filming a ceremony that's an hour and then like manning a camera and then having to go over to another camera to reset it and all that? Like, that's annoying. It's really annoying. I've done it. I've been there. It's annoying. You want to have cameras that roll all the way through. In an ideal situation, maybe when you first start out, you need to not like sweat it over the equipment. Like, sure, if you have cameras that have to reset, like, so be it. That's what you have to do, right? But the best way to learn about equipment with filming weddings is to actually shoot weddings and go, oh shoot, I wish my camera could have done this. I wish I had this setting. And you start seeing what other people are doing, and then you have to ask other people like, hey, how'd you get that shot? Like, hey, what'd you do to make this happen? And then you go back to your camera and try to set it, and you go, oh, my camera doesn't do that. So then you do research, and you go, okay, well, this camera does that. This camera does that. Now, in my experience, I've had really good luck with my Sonys. I have a Sony FX6, Sony FX3. I have two main cameras. And if I have to use it, I use my Canon R, which is what I'm on now, for a third camera if need be. But it's annoying because I have to reset it. But Sony's always, like, in a dark situation, especially with, like, dancing, I can kick up the ISO. I like it because it doesn't get grainy when I kick that up and the lights are out and people are dancing. That's always been a really nice option for me. And they have, like, the dual SD card slots, so I can, like, store as much footage as I need to with, like, the amount of memory I have. And they both have really good battery lives on them, so I really like that. There's, like, so much to love about Sony's. So right now, Sony's been my favorite for filming weddings. Now, I know some people might say they like Panasonic's. It all depends. You have to do your own research. Some people will say, Max, what's the best camera? Well, I'm going to tell you what I have because I think that's the best. But do your research. Watch videos on YouTube that will tell you, like you can search like good cameras for filming weddings and people talk about their cameras. But hopefully, hearing what my favorite cameras are helps you. I mean, I know people that like Sony A7S IIIs for filming weddings. I've heard a lot of good things about those. Some people even like the big handheld cameras, like the JVCs, etc. So yeah, it's all stuff that you have to look up, and you learn. The only way to learn is by filming weddings. Another thing that like is really important with weddings that I learned a little bit late is like having all the audio gear. So like having like an H6 where like it's a recording device you can like plug an XLR into and plug an XLR into the guy's soundboard at the wedding, or having like a nice lapel mic to record the vows to make sure it gets like both of their vows, or having like a nice little clip-on mic. for certain like grab and go situations. And it's always good to have like backup audio situations too, in case one fails, you have like a backup for another. Because, oh my God, imagine if your audio equipment failed the day of. What are you going to do? Go, oh, can't record your vows. Oh, sorry. Like, no, you need to have a backup, right? So always have like audio back. Audio is like so important. I will die on that hill. That's one thing I stress you look into for filming wings, like different audio equipment you need. So like I'd say have an H6. I have wireless Go 2s. I have a lapel. I have like two little handheld recorders. I think the other one's in my box right now, so I don't have it, but two little handheld recorders for like a backup of a backup in case, stuff hits the fan. So that is good to know. I'm trying to think. A camera light is always nice to have, like a little light on top of your camera for like the dances. Sometimes it gets really dark for filming the dances. That's really nice to have. Yeah, that I think is about all I can say on equipment before I feel like I'm repeating the same things. But let's dive into talking with clients. When it comes to talking with your clients, this is a big thing because this can be like the make or break of the whole situation. Different clients are different, right? So I can't just sit here and talk about one little thing that paints all clients, right? Everyone likes something different about each person, right? So if someone hits you up and they say, hey, I like your visuals. I'd like you to film my wedding, blah, blah. It's, they like your work, or maybe someone recommends you, or maybe they like you as a person. They say, hey, we enjoyed working with you last time. We'd love to work with you again. Or maybe you shot like another video for them and they want you to do this other video for them. It's all different, and how you handle the situation with each client is very, it's very like, I don't want to say touchy, but it's very like specific to whether or not, you get the wedding gig. And so that said, and this is something I'm still learning like every day. Like I just had a situation recently, where I was talking with someone last year about filming their wedding literally in like 4 days from now. And I was like, hey, like we settled all the details. We figured this out, that, whatever. I got like a down deposit, and that is like, again, like I'll talk about that in a sec, but like all of a sudden now I'm ghosted. I'm just like, I'm not there anymore. Even though I got a down deposit, and that's a good problem to have, right? But that's one thing where I'm like, maybe there was something I could have done better on the end of communication end of things. But I followed up like 4 or 5 times, so it's not. I feel like it's not really my fault. But you always gotta look at it from that angle. Like, how can I communicate with the next client better? And look at like what other people are doing too. Like when you talk to other people, they're like, oh yeah, I have like this package I offer, where it's like you get this, and that. This package I offer gets this, and that for that amount. Like, and it's like a very like organized thing. So it's like you send someone an email, and they can look at that email and go, okay, I want this, and that. Cool. This is the amount I get for that. Boom. And then you just grab it and go, and they're set. But once you do that, doesn't mean that's like the end of it. Talking with a client can be like two different things. There's people that want to like meet up in person that say, hey, we got to get to know you. Just the same thing I was saying earlier, where it's like you got to build that connection with the person first. And some people like that. Other people they're fine with an email, and that's how it goes. And so if they're fine with an email, you really want to sort out the details through this email and be like, hey, is there like, am I going to capture everything else you want? Like, is there any special events happening? Like, is there any things that I should be aware of that aren't like listed on here? Let me know what's going on. You always want them to send you like their schedule and the day of like what's happening. That way, like if there's like a special surprise, you don't miss it. Or if there's like, a different event happening, you're not going to miss that. It all depends on like the person and what they want throughout the day. So it's always important you like communicate that, and you communicate like what their final product is going to be as well. And what that's going to look like and what they'll get with that final product. So again, I'll always like drive home that communication thing. Contracts are also really important when it comes to this, to make sure that, you guys are all on the same page. That's another important level. But now that I've said that and I've talked about kind of like communication, I want to talk about the editing end of things. Now, back to what I said earlier, when I first started doing these weddings, the first one I ever edited for myself to give to someone took so long. I mean, I think they wanted a DVD, they wanted an edit. It was like, there was all these different moving parts. And like, I don't do DVDs anymore. I used to do DVDs. And I still have the technology to do it, but I'm just like, I'm kind of done with that era of my life. But yeah, that took me like a little bit. And then making the actual edit was like the hardest thing, because I was like, it's like, how does this go? But then I like sat back, I'm like, wait a minute. This just goes like chronologically, like how the day goes, right? That's how you want to watch a video, like how your day went, right? And then I was like trying to piece together like how I wanted this highlight video to go, because I was like, well, what are the highlights? Like, what am I going to do? And I started to look at like my coolest shots throughout the day, and I was like, okay, this is in the beginning, kind of like did that chronologically, but like summed it up in a quick little highlight video. And I don't know why I thought it was any different than another highlight video. I was like, I don't know why that like even fazed me, but it was stressful. I'm not gonna lie, it was very stressful. And I was soon, I realized like instead of doing like a multicam edit on the ceremony, like it took so much longer because like the clips are so big and there's such big file sizes you're working with, and you're syncing up audio, making sure you're hearing the right audio at the right time. And it's all like a big listening game, making sure like this audio is synced up with that, this audio is synced up with that, and the colors look good, and what you're giving out to this person is gonna be like what they're thinking too, right? Because everyone has like a vision for how their day looks, and you want to make sure you're like matching that, right? So that's like another thing you're like concerned about. And I'm just like, I like all these things are going on in my head as I'm editing it. I'm like, you know what? Just make the edit, just make it, and see what happens, right? And like obviously like that was something I communicated where I was like, hey, this is like one of my first weddings, like blah blah blah. And they knew, So yeah, I did that. And it took me, I want to say the edit took me like a month. I think I worked on it for a month. And after that, I learned that like some people like don't even like give their wedding videos out for like 3 to 6 months to people, because people will take like months at a time to work on it. And as you get like busier in the business, like, and you do more and more weddings, like you'll realize the weddings add up. So like it makes sense why people give like long, times to deliver the wedding video to people, because like they have other weddings they've already shot that they have to edit. And so yeah, it's a very, very interesting thing, because it's like it all depends on how much work you have and what you can do, and like on top of your other gigs too. Might not be wedding gigs, it's like other gigs you have to work on, so you have to try to manage your time. It's like a time management game of like editing. But the hardest thing about editing weddings is that like if you are working on other projects, to come back to a project and like kind of relive the day in your head and be like, okay, this is how this went, like this is gonna go here, and you try to like reimagine this whole thing all over again. And like coming back to editing a wedding, like it takes a lot of energy to like if you sit down in one day and knock out a wedding. Like I know very select people that do this, and I'm like, I envy them, because I don't know how the hell they do it. But it's like it's a very tedious thing. Like you can't just like slop a wedding together. Like you have to know like exactly what you're thinking, exactly what's going on, what you want to hear, what you want to see, what song you want, what visual goes here, and what time of day you got that visual, and look at your clips and put that in there and make sure it's colored right, and then make sure that syncs up with the audio that you put in there. There's just like so many moving parts to this little highlight video or this whatever thing you're making for them. And so working on it like day after day, you're thinking about all those things, and it's stressful, man. It's really stressful. I'm speaking from someone who's filmed and edited a ton of weddings, but it's a good thing that it's stressful, because you should sit there and take day after day and, take maybe a month or two to work on it. Maybe take a few months. Depends on how busy you are. You know what I mean? And so it's all like, it's kind of like a mental game. Like, to be honest, like I've had days where like I know I have a wedding to edit, but then I go to edit it and I'm like, dude, like my mental space is not there to do this. Like I'll stare at a wall and I'll be like, I cannot do this. Like I literally can't do it. And I think that's normal, right? Like just because you can't do it one day doesn't mean like you can't get to them on time. Like that's just how like human brain works. Like I've talked to like very professional editors with wedding videos who've explained the same thing to me. And I used to think they were crazy for saying it, but I do get it now because it's happened to me. It's just like, it's a big mental game, man. And one last thing I want to talk about real quickly here before I bring this episode to a close is I mentioned this earlier in the episode, but my overall experience working on weddings. So far to this day, I've had like a pretty good experience. I've had some like weird things here and there where like some people have just like either ditched me in communication, or some people have like said, hey, I want you to do this, blah, blah, and then like act like, they're like, oh, we kind of forgot. Like I've had like weird stuff like that happen, you know what I mean? But like that's bound to happen in this business. Like it's whatever. I've also had like some weird things with like a different like DJs where like the DJ isn't willing to work with you, because there's like that element of weddings where like the DJs have to like coordinate with you to like tell you what's going on, but also like give you the audio, and like people that aren't willing to communicate. Like I've had different issues like that. I feel like I've also had like some weird issues with like people with different weddings I've worked with, but like very minute things. But what that all comes down to is like how you communicate what you're doing, and if someone doesn't understand what you're saying, then there's like going to be a disagreement there, right? But for the most part, I've had like honestly really good experience doing it so far. I usually look forward to weddings when people are like, hey, I need you to film my wedding. Like I'm usually like very stoked. Like very recently, a friend of mine had me film his wedding out in Mexico, and that was like probably like the highlight of my summer. I was so excited about that. That was like one of the funnest things I've done. It was like just such a crazy experience. It was kind of more of a laid back sort of thing. It was like very very easygoing day. They told me exactly what they wanted. I knew exactly what to give them, etc. It like everything just worked out like so perfectly. There was no like hiccups, no this, that. So yeah, that was probably like the highlight of like my career working weddings. It's always fun, like in my experience, like second shooting to this day, especially if you can find like someone who's willing to pay you the right amount to second shoot. That is always fun, because then like you're working with a friend, or maybe you're working for like someone else that is contacting you and say, hey, this company needs like someone to shoot for them on their behalf, and you're maybe a lead shooter for someone, and they can pay you like a lead shooter rate. Those are always fun gigs, because I don't have to edit. I just shoot. Here you go. Here's the footage. And I don't have to think about that wedding ever again, because I just give it to them, right? Those are always fun gigs for me. It's like, spend like 8 hours, you go home, cool, call it a day. And you're not like mentally editing in your head while you're shooting those. I know people that like, I do this too. Sometimes I'm filming when like mentally edit in my head. Like when I was doing that Mexico wedding, I was like mentally editing throughout the day. That's something that goes on. I'm trying to think of any other like interesting experiences I've had. Yeah, I've had like some stuff where people hit me up for weddings that are like super close by. Those are really nice, because you like barely have to travel for it. But I've also had like weddings where people have hit me up like way like 2.5 hours away in Wisconsin. And so those are interesting, but it all comes down to like communication at the end of the day. Is like it's going to judge how your experience is with weddings. And you're the captain of your own ship, and that's going to be a lot of what like your experience is. So like if you work with a client that like you sense is like weird from the front, and there's some weird little moving parts going on, whatever it is, that might not be the person you should work with, because you're going to find out some weird stuff down the road, and that's going to set you back, right? So that's not a situation that you want to be in. But when you work with someone who's like, again, a great communicator, and it's like, hey, they tell you what they want, it seems very like cut and dry, then that's the kind of person that you want to work with. So that will always lead to like the best experience possible with shooting weddings. And my big thing is like, if there's anything that happens in person too that's like weird or whatever, that like doesn't have to do with the couple, that you like communicate that to the couple so that they know like, hey, the DJ's being a weirdo, or this person's like screwing with my camera, or this person, whatever the hell it is, you communicate that, because that will also like determine your experience, and if like your professionalism, right? Like your professionalism to the client will always be the thing that draws like other people to you from that client, right? Or like they'll recommend you, they'll remember you for your professionalism, etc. So I think that's a good note to leave off on. I know I was like a little bit vague in this, but I just kind of want to scratch on the surface. If there's any questions you have about this, let me know. You know, I think I covered a lot of good grounds here. Yeah, man, there's a lot to be said. I could probably make another episode where I get like more specific into like, you know, what you're shooting day by day and or like minute by minute, and you know, you're shooting this and making sure that you walk into this room and you know, I could probably make a whole other thing about that, but that's not really what's interesting. I think the stuff I cover is what's interesting. So, all in all, freaking love it. Love shooting weddings. If, you know, someone is listening to us that knows I film videos, let me know if you do need a wedding filmed. Always happy to capture your wedding. And with that said, hit that subscribe button if you're new here to this podcast. And there'll be more episodes coming soon. I'm going to try to stay on top of this. I'm getting real lazy lately, not making episodes anymore. So if you enjoyed this, subscribe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.